but yes, it's Burt Mustin and it's William Shallert and James Cameron. If you put them all in a blender and you drop the blender, you get me.
Hey everybody, it's Jim of Animateducated. Today you're going to meet John Musker, and we're going to talk about his film.
I'm hip. I'm no square. I'm alert, I'm awake, I'm aware. I am always on the scene, making the rounds, digging the sounds. I buy People magazine 'cause I'm hip. Like Dig, I'm in step. When it was hip to be hip, I was hip. I don't blow, but I'm a fan. Look at me swing, ring-a-ding-ding.
When I retired, that was one of my goals in my retirement, was to finally do a short film. I had a bunch of them that I had thought of over the years here and there with to greater and lesser degrees. So I just said, this will be my little thing, and I've really enjoyed doing it. The crazy thing is I hadn't animated in like 35 years, done the actual animation. I've done, I directed and I storyboarded and I did some character design ideas, but actually animation I did when I was at Cal Arts for 2 years, and I did at the studio. I started as an animator on The Fox and the Hound and this Christmas special, the small one. And so I animated between those two things. I may have animated for about 4 years or 5 years or something like that. And then I've done a few little tiny bits here and there. On Little Mermaid, I did a few little fixes on somebody's scene who was on something else, and I did a tiny little fix or something. But that was it, basically. So I haven't really animated in 35 years. So it was a little daunting, but I really loved doing animation. That's what I had envisioned doing originally, was being an animator. Um, and of course, I wanted to do it hand-drawn animation because that's what I know and that's the art form that I love. So that's what I did. I said, I'm going to dig out my Preston Blair book and my Eric Goldberg Crash Course in Animation book and look at some films again, remind myself of some great animation by Ward Kimball and Fred Moore and Bill Teitla and those kind of people and Ollie Johnson and John Lounsbury. And so I did, and I just sort of dove in and I kind of relearned it and really, I was doing my short, as is fairly cartoony. So when I did animate, I didn't really get to do all that much cartoony animation. So I was doing a lot of stuff that I had never really done before. So it was a learning experience for me, which is what we all should have, shouldn't we? In our dotage and throughout our lives, is always find new things to absorb. In fact, on Saturdays, my wife and I we're taking a tap dancing class, and I'm struggling, but it's been fun. And I don't know anything about tap dancing, but yeah.
Yeah, that's I saw your film. Finally, I got to see it with you.
Yeah, was that at CTN that you saw it?
It was at the SIFA.
Oh, the SIFA screen. When I
Yeah,
screened it at yeah, it was at the Paseo in Pasadena,
yeah.
California, here for your international audience. But yes, yeah, so that was a fun night to show you. I showed it in concert with Andres Deja, so showed Mushka, and then Andrew Chesworth did this wonderful short, The Brave Locomotive, which has been touring and winning festivals around the world, and so he showed his film and talked about it. And all three of us had in common that they were hand drawn, they were all passion projects. Mine is going to be distributed by Ron Diamond theatrically. Ron Diamond he has a thing called the Animation Show of Shows, which is sort of like the old tournée of animation. It's a collection of shorts that play theatrically at art houses and also on university campuses and things like that. So I signed on with him. So over the next year, it'll be touring around to different places around the country. I'm hoping to go to a few of those screenings and to see it with audiences. In the meantime, my film is on the festival circuit, and it's been in various festivals. Last year, it was at Annecy. I was thrilled it got at Annecy. I had no idea when I entered it there what I was getting into, in the sense that when I heard that I got in, I was very happy. I was like, "Hooray, this is, the premier animation festival in the world, as far as I'm concerned." What I didn't realize is that they get like 3,200 entries, of which they picked maybe 40 to be in the festival. Had I known that, I would have been terrified and I would have assumed I wasn't getting in. So it wasn't only until after I got in that I discovered, oh, there's other films that I think are really good. They're not in here. I managed to get in, and I was very lucky. And so my wife and I went to Annecy. I also went, I brought Talene Tanelian, who is my partner in making the movie. She really, she was my editor, my compositor. She was kind of the hub of the production wheel, and I would still be working on the film without her help. She lives in Salt Lake City. We did it through Zoom and things like that. Because most of this film, I guess really all the film practically, well, it started before the pandemic, but then the pandemic set in. And so I did it, my collaborators were all far flung here in LA. And then I had my great background painter, Ken Slevin, lives in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And so does my ink and paint department. Ironically, they live in Bethel, Pennsylvania, which is further east in Pennsylvania. So I've never met either of them, but they're actually going to come to the screening that I'm going to do in New York in a couple of weeks at School of Visual Arts. So I'll finally get to meet them in the flesh. So I'm excited to thank them personally for all the wonderful work they did on this. So.
Well, that's great. It's funny you mentioned you're going to see it with an audience. I'm just curious. I mean, you've made big films like Little Mermaid, and all the ones that you've made.
That's right.
How does it feel when you actually, you go in and you watch the movie with an audience? I mean, is it the same, or are you?
I think it changes somewhat, and of course it's nerve-wracking because we, when we were like the Disney features, we would preview with an audience, so we would show it internally, a number of times while we were making it, but just the staff would see it, and we would encourage them to give us notes, and that would help us get objective, because anytime you see something over and over and over again, you lose your objectivity about it. So, but it's terrifying when you're doing it. You've been working, because by the time we preview it theatrically, like on Little Mermaid, you're sort of whatever 5/6 of the way done. It's like the movie's coming out in November, we're showing it in June or something like that. So it's pretty much there, but you still have a little window still to fix some things that an audience might, seeing it with an audience, you might realize, ooh, this thing I thought was working isn't working. They didn't laugh at that joke. They were confused, whatever. You have time to kind of patch some things up, which we've done on all the movies, some to a greater degree than others. But that is a terrifying one, because your fate is in the hands of people. I tell this joke, and Ron has stolen my joke because I think it was my memory and he's made it his memory. But Ron Clements said, we were at the Little Mermaid preview, the first preview, and I had a little kid sitting next to me. And so, the movie is being shown, and they always have the woman, Catherine Parro is her name, who worked with the NRG, who are the research people who conduct these screenings. And she would always do a spiel before the screening. What you're going to see is unfinished. Some of it's in black and white, but when you see it in the theater, ultimately, it will all be in color, just as you expect. But for now, it's a work in progress. All that. Anyway, so the film on schools, in the very beginning, I think it may have still been in story sketch, but it's, the sort of a foggy sky, and the seagulls are flying through, and we go through them, and we go down to the ship that kind of breaks through the mist. And I just remember this little kid, what the hell is that? And I'm like, oh no, it's like, we're in trouble. We're only 10 seconds into this, and we've already lost this 8-year-old next to me. So that was kind of funny and scary at the same time. But yeah, they do focus groups afterwards, and yeah, they write notes, and you're like, and sometimes they're good, and sometimes they're like, no, that's not a good idea. And so anyway, but then just seeing it, but now when you see it finished with an audience, generally speaking, it's fun. I mean, the movies we made at Disney and my own short movie, we made for an audience. I mean, I wasn't, even when I did my short film, I wasn't thinking my only fun, some artists are that way. They do it just for their own good, and it's like, I don't care if people like it or they don't like it, or they understand it or they don't understand it. As long as I do it and I like it, that's enough. No, that is not enough for me. I make films that are intended to entertain an audience, and if they don't entertain an audience, I've failed in some fashion, even if I've amused myself while making it. So every time you show with an audience, you're nervous, but I enjoy it because I like the communal. That's what I like about movies. It's a communal experience. You share it with other people. Movies I've liked best, I've seen in a theater with an audience, not just me watching it on a big screen TV or even a small screen TV. But there are many movies I have liked that I saw principally that way. But it's great to share the experience. But it can be nerve-wracking too. But so I've screened this short. I had a big premiere screening here in Beverly Hills back in May for I'm Hip, the short that I made. And I wound up, I rented a theater, the Fine Arts Theater, and it seats 400, and I practically filled it with people that I knew. And so that was a wonderful, that was the strongest reaction it's ever gotten. And again, they're friends of mine, they're colleagues, they know all the in jokes, whatever, and they just are very supportive. And it was a great evening. And then I did that same thing in Chicago. I'm from Chicago. And of course, my film features cameos. It's a very cartoony riff on this jazz song by Dave Frishberg, but I worked in cameo caricatures. I do caricatures. And so I thought, instead of just creating these random characters that are going to interact with my hero, this cat, I thought, well, I can make it people that I know. So I tended to fill the film with people that I know, caricatures of them. And a number of them are my in-laws and relatives, nieces, nephews, cousins, friends from Chicago. So they're in the film as well. So I wanted to do a screening back in Chicago. So I rented the Tivoli Theater in Downers Grove, suburb of Chicago, very neat old retro theater that goes back to the 30s. And I showed it there to like 250 people, I'd say. And that was great too, to see on a big screen, see it with, all that my loved ones, my friends, family, really a lot of fun. But then I have seen it in around the world. It's tricky, having seen it now internationally, because I see it subtitled. And my film is pretty fast. I mean, it kind of goes, even for people who speak English, it can be at times perhaps too fast, but it's really a killer when you see it internationally, where people are trying to read the title and then they're looking up and then cut and it goes to another scene. So that's something I learned. I mean, I've done many films at Disney and I never really worried about that. So now if I make another short, I may at least think a little bit about the aspect of, if it's being dubbed, just for people to absorb it. It's obviously the more dialogue you have and all that, the trickier it is. So it's not an absolute factor, but it's something I will take into account a little bit more if I do another one of these. And I'm thinking there are some other ones I would like to do. I don't know for sure if I will do one. I've got maybe a half dozen that I semi-seriously would like to do. They all involve music. They're all based on songs or pieces of music. Some of them have no words. They're just lyrics, which make them very open to many different story interpretations. Those are the most free form of the ones that I'm cooking up in my head right now. But they remain somewhat in my head, all of these films. And over the next year or whatever, 6 months, I'm hoping to dig into some of them and do some drawings, think more about the stories. As I did with this one, before I started this one, I'm Hip, I had thought about, really, 20 years ago. And I always thought I might make it. When I was thinking of doing a short, I had a number of them I considered. And I went to my wife and I said, yeah, I've got all these different ideas. And she just gave me my marching orders, which she said, do something funny. And some of the ones I had were dramatic and were emotional, and some were more funny. And so this was one that was funny. And I thought, if I'm trying to do animation that I haven't done in 30 years, doing animation that's just fun to draw and fun to animate, and hopefully fun for the viewer to watch, seemed like a good approach just to get me through the hard work of animating a little bit. So that was the direction I decided to go in on this one, and I did. But before I went into it though, I listened to the song again and I pictured, okay, I may be sitting here for 2 years listening to this song. Does it still seem funny to me? The song that I heard 20 years ago and whatever. And do I still think I have ideas for how it would, work? And can I imagine working on it that long and sustaining my enthusiasm and all that? And I listened to it and I said, yeah, still seems funny to me. I can picture these scenes. I think it would make a fun short film. So then I had to get the rights to the song. That was sort of the first step. I didn't really do any storyboarding on the film until I got the rights. I had ideas in my head, and I had done some little drawings here and there, but I really wanted to make sure because I couldn't, it's not like I do this subject without that song. If I don't get this song, I'm doing a whole different movie. So I did get the rights, and so then that was, I think it was sort of the latter part of 2018. So I really began the movie in earnest, kind of in early 2019 was when I really started into it. And so it took me 4 years to make it. I thought originally it might take me 2 years. So I underestimated, like I could do everything from a production point of view. I was always getting in trouble with the production managers when I was an animator because they would ask me when I'd be done with a certain scene, and I'd say, "Oh yeah, I'll have it by Friday." And then Friday would come along. "Well, I didn't quite. I got this and that I got to do." It would turn into next Friday, and so they were never happy with me. But I worked pretty hard, and I my footage. They had footage charts. They kept track of how fast everybody went, and I wasn't the slowest, but I wasn't the fastest. I was somewhere maybe halfway to two-thirds on that chart or something like that. But and I do the joke also, which is true, that one of the things that appealed to me about doing a short film is that you can get a reaction from people sooner. I mean, you do a feature at Disney and it takes you 4 years and you got these ideas and no one out in the public sees it for 4 years. So you got to work on an immense sense of delayed gratification. But with this short, I thought, well, I'll fix that. So of course, what did I do? Instead of doing 90 minutes that it took me 4 years to do, I did 4 minutes in 4 years. Yes, progress. So yes, it wasn't actually it didn't wind up being any faster, but if I did another one, maybe I could go faster. I don't know. We'll see. There's things I could do possibly to shorten things up. I never really did have because I produced it myself and I, paid for everything and I paid all the freelancers who worked on it and everything. I didn't want to try and chisel free labor out of people, but I had very loose production schedules, if you can even call it that. I had sort of ideas like, okay, by the end of the year, I'd like to be this far. Or, da, da, da. Some of those I came close to hitting, some of those I didn't. But there was no pressing thing until really the Annecy Festival when I wanted to enter it in that. And there was a deadline, although even that I got a slight reprieve on because I heard from Fumi Kitahara, who was a publicist for various films and used to work at Disney and worked with Howard Green back in the day at Disney. But she told me, I think, that Annecy accepted works in progress, that the movie didn't have to be done when you first submitted. So I looked it up and yes, she was right. So I submitted it unfinished as a work in progress and it got accepted. And then, so I was like, okay, I got it. There was a deadline though, you got to have it done by this deadline. So that meant, and I got a little nervous because some of my cleanup people, some of the great cleanup people that I used were also working on the short Once Upon a Studio for Disney, some in-house and some as freelancers. And so I was like, suddenly my cleanup, again, and I don't have a production manager or whatever, or kind of a schedule kind of thing, but suddenly people were not available. They're like, well, when I'm done with this, I can come back and work on your thing. But until then, this is the pressing thing. I was like, oh no, just when I finally have a deadline, people are disappearing to work on Once Upon a Studio. Fortunately, there wasn't that much left to do, and they did finish their work on that, and they came and they finished off the parts that needed to be done. So I got everything done that I wanted to get done. I didn't have to compromise. I didn't have to put something on 2s or 4s or 6s that I wanted on 1s. It was all on 1s I wanted on 1s. And one of the major production parts of my movie was that it was cleaned up. I know when I was first getting into it, Glenn Keane was telling me, "Oh yeah, just use your rough animation. Just leave it rough." And so like, nobody wants to see my rough drawings. They want to see your rough drawings. They want to see my rough drawings. So that was part of it. So I animated roughly, which made it easier for me to animate. And that's the way I animated when I wasn't animated at Disney. It was tough on the assistants because I animated kind of loosely and I in-betweened everything myself. I did my own rough in-betweens, but I did them very crudely just to kind of carry the action so I could get a sense of the timing. But then Dan Tanaka was my main man. Dan Tanaka is one of the great cleanup artists at the Disney studio. He had kind of moved over to, I think he had done some work for Disney Television, and he's semi-retired. But anyway, I asked him if he was interested, and he was, and he just did an amazing job interpreting my scribbles. In fact, even the name of my production company, I had to create a name for it when I started it. And originally I was thinking I was going to call it Night Owl Pictures because I always work late at night, and that's one of my shticks. And then I discovered that title was taken by some production company in North Carolina. And then I came up with another one that I liked, and I ran it by my son and my wife, and they liked it, so I went with that. So my production company is Scribbly Pictures, which is the way I draw. So I felt like it was right because no matter what, if I make any more of these animated films, and regardless of the style, and I am picturing some are different styles, and some are, could be more drawn, not as broadly or cartoonily, but I know they're all going to be scribbly, at least when they come out of my pencil. How it gets translated after that, it depends. Some films maybe I could lead that way depending on what they are, but yeah, I'm a big proponent of scribbliness and messiness in general in my private life. It's not something I recommend and or I'm proud of, but if I could pan my camera around to my studio here, and I won't, um, it's it's uh, it's a total disaster area with paper piled up all over, and I see you've got your bric-a-brac back there. It looks
Yeah,
you look
yeah.
you look
I don't want
fairly
to.
organized, but I see some books stacked on top of
Oh
books
yeah,
that
yeah. I got some books on top of book. Yeah, yeah. I
I got books
this
on
is
top
this
of
is the
books.
good view.
Yeah, well,
Pan a
that's
little this way, that way. Ooh, it's dangerous.
exactly. I've got my camera, it's out of range, but there is a nightmare that's 270 degrees around me right now that I don't dare show anyone.
I mean, you can watch this film without knowing who's who in your film.
Yeah,
And it's nice that
yeah,
you put those people in. And I remember
yeah.
I was looking when you went into that talk, you were saying like you were naming exactly who's who and all that. And one of them was I went to Columbia College in Chicago, and I had a
You went there.
yeah, yeah, I
Are you
went.
from Chicago? I don't
No,
remember.
I'm from actually Florida,
Yeah,
but
Columbia College. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
My
yeah. Dan Janello is your
Dan Dino, was he your
son-in-law.
teacher?
Yeah, he was.
Okay, well, yeah.
He was this guy, and back in the day, I mean, he was hip. I mean, he had the
Oh, completely, totally
black.
hipster.
Yeah, he was like from the, another, like we were in the, new wave era or whatever.
Yeah,
He was above that. Somehow his style was just very sleek, black shirts, those big
completely. I
black.
know he and yeah, he married my sister Mimi, and
Mhm.
but yeah, Columbia College. Yeah, so that's Dan Anello, great guy, great.
Yeah.
He's written a bunch of books on film and whatnot. So yeah, so I made my film with these cameos. You don't have to know who these people are, but I did it just for my own amusement and for them. And so there's a scene in a movie theater. There's a line in the song where the cat says, I'm getting my kicks digging arty French flicks with my shades on. Everyone in the theater has sunglasses on. And he's sitting there with his girlfriend, Imogene, his much taller girlfriend, Imogene, who's kind of a beatnik chick, an arty chick with long black hair. But yes, in the audience there is Dan Danella and my sister Mimi in the back row. But also in that audience is Brad Bird and his wife Brad. I went to Cal Arts with, and Henry Selick, whom I went to Cal Arts with, and they're both film maniacs. And I have Howard Green, the Disney publicist, in there. I have Jerry Reese, I went to Cal Arts with, and who directed Brave Little Toaster, and his wife Rebecca, and Harry Sabin, who I went to Cal Arts with, and I've got Charles Solomon, the film critic, in there, and his partner Scott, and I've got Ron Diamond, the film impresario, in there, and Jennifer Yuen and her husband Mark Kolesniko. Jennifer did most, not all, but of the layouts in my movie. She did an amazing job, and I had worked with her years ago at Disney, and so I put her and her husband Mark, who also was a layout guy back in the day, they're in the crowd as well. So yes, it was a chance for me to put all these friends and colleagues and film-oriented people in this theater shot. So and they were held cells; they didn't move, so it was easy to sort of just they were wrapped watching the movie. So
This is a film that has, a lot of lip sync, and he's singing and all that. Did you have to sit and learn how to do the soundtrack, or did you give that to someone
yeah,
else to
yeah,
do?
I did. Well, the track is the song, but in terms of animating to that track, I used. I was thinking, yeah, I'm going to have to read quote unquote the song. Years ago, when I had other films I was thinking of doing, I didn't know how to use a sound reader. This was back before computers, not so. Literally, someone would have a sound head, they
Yeah.
would have to write down frame by frame what everything was. So years ago, for a film that I was thinking of doing, that I'm still considering doing, a friend of mine at Disney who was a musician and had a sound reading thing took. I had this song that I like transferred to 35 mag stock, and he went through and he read the whole thing. And I still have those. You put on what are called grays, which are like exposure sheets, which are the blueprint of the movie. I still have those grays somewhere. However, with the advent of great technology, I wound up animating my film in a program called TV Paint. There's Harmony and there's TV Paint. TV Paint had been recommended to me by various people saying it was the closest thing to 2D they had. I considered doing my movie on paper. I was going to do but I was considering TV Paint also, and I was going to try and do a kind of a bake off between the two, a la John Henry. I don't know that anyone gets the reference anymore, but John Henry, the steel driving man. It's like,
Right.
can he beat the machine, or can the man beat the machine win? And in the case of John Henry, as I recall, I think the machine did beat John Henry, but he gave the
Yeah.
result. But so, and maybe this is the same case, because basically I did some drawings, animation drawings. I got an animation disc right over there on paper and all that. But I was really having trouble scanning them in a way that looked good. Somehow the camera I had, I'd shoot it, and I'd get all these wrinkles in the paper, and you could hardly see the lines. And I just like, that doesn't look good. I don't know. Let me just try this TV Paint thing. And then I tried that. And I've worked in Photoshop for a number of years doing drawings, and it's a lot like Photoshop. You work in layers, you work on a Cintiq. It doesn't bother me to draw on a Cintiq the way it does some people, where they feel like, well, I really want the tooth of the paper to, in the pencil and that thing. And that wasn't an issue. So I started with TV Paint, and then I really liked TV Paint. And I think it really was a help to me from a production standpoint for various reasons. One, you can work in layers, you can copy and paste and resize and transform, do all those kind of Photoshop-y kind of things. And to your point, the soundtrack is right there. I'm working, I'm literally, there's the shot and there's a track. I can literally see the track, and and they have a pass where you can do notes. So I went through and did a reading of all the musical hits, all the plinks on the piano and the bass line for drum hits that I wanted to hit. So those were all literally graphically marked out, right? This sounds like having them actually built into your drawing board. It's almost combines with that. So that was handy. And so I never looked back really, and I used that. And that's what I did. In fact, I was working with my advisor on TV Paint in the beginning, a guy named David Nethery. I don't know if you know David, but David used to work at Disney, and he lives in Florida nowadays. He went down to work at the Florida studio, and he knows a ton about TV Paint. And he was saying on some of the projects that he was involved in, even when he worked in TV Paint, he still maintained traditional exposure sheets because he thought that was kind of a good thing to do. So I was doing that. So I Xeroxed an exposure sheet, whatever, and I got cover sheets, and I was making, 60 of these exposure sheets for all my shots. And then I did a speaking gig down at Lipscomb University for Bancroft Brothers, but mainly at that time, I think it was Tom. I don't know if Tony had started there by then. And Tony is there now teaching. But anyway, they said to me, what are you using exposure sheets for? It's right there in TV Paint. You don't need that. I mean, you're wasting. So all that effort was sort of wasted. So those are filed away somewhere. I never did use those. So I just used the built-in exposure sheet, they were right. It's a much better, more sensible way to go. I just didn't know it was new to me. So yeah, so I really had to learn TV Paint as I was doing it. Fortunately, Talene, the woman that assisted me, knows TV Paint backwards and forwards. David Nethery helped me. There was a guy who helped me a little bit, Don Perro, I think his name is, who's up at Vancouver, teaches there in the Northwest or in Canada. They all helped steer me through TV Paint when I was struggling. And anyway, the other thing that I could do in TV Paint is it has a variety of brushes, and I got some third-party brushes that can really do different rendering type things. So I wanted to get a scratchy pen and ink line, around the characters. So I could do that in TV Paint. If I tried to do that traditionally, it would have really been a nightmare and been prohibitive. But they could do this in TV Paint, where you're using the same stylus that you got, but just like with Photoshop, suddenly you can have a very textured brush, you can have a watercolor brush, you can have an oil brush, and so I was able to get a look for the film that I don't think I could have gotten, or I could have gotten very easily if I had really done it on paper.
So I got a couple questions from people that are on the on my YouTube channel. And one person asked, what about the DC animated Metal Man?
There's a comic book called Metal Man, which is about a group of robots. Ron and I grew up on that comic book, DC comic book from the 60s. We really liked it. We had pitched it years ago when we were on the outs at Disney after Treasure Planet, and we thought it could make a neat live action animated film with the robots being done in CG and the people being done live. And the gimmick with those robots is each of the robots is based on an element that dictates sort of its powers. So they're like humanoid robots, and so there's gold is highly reflective and all this, and mercury can turn into a gas or a liquid like the real mercury, and iron is very solid and strong, and lead is kind of can work as shields. Well, anyway, it was the most Marvel comic like comic book on the DC lineup. The robots all had personalities. They weren't just robotic. They reflected their elements. So Mercury was very mercurial. He was a hothead, literally, and he would explode into little globules, and Lead was kind of slow and good natured, and so it was really a fun, and it seemed like animation would be a cool medium to do for that. We wound up pitching it to Lauren Schuler Donner years ago, and she really liked it. So we developed it a bit, and then we wrote a little treatment, and we went to Warner Brothers, and the producer there, Dan Lin, who we showed it to, didn't like our take on it, wanted it to be darker, didn't want, thought it was too funny and too, not dark enough. And that was the whole appeal to us, was no, it's a comedy and it's got, more humanistic elements. That's what they didn't want. So, and of course, DC, they've had a great track record with their comic book adaptations. But so anyway, so we wound up leaving the project. But then a couple of years ago, we heard that DC was interested in developing some of their lesser known comic book properties, or that Warner's was interested in exploring some of the lesser known DC comic books. So we mentioned to a fellow who's a producer who told us that, well, we have one based on Metal Man. He said, well, I can get you in and you can pitch it. So we did, and they liked it. So it went into development at Warner's a couple of years ago. Then Warner's changed management, sort of, and they got bought by Discover and David Zaslav. And then they were trying to look for somebody to be in charge of DC. They put James Gunn in charge of DC. And then they needed someone to really head the animation group, and they got what's his name? Because he worked at DreamWorks for a long time, and I'm forgetting his name. But we never worked with him. But he was a guy who was in charge of DreamWorks for a while. Anyway, we were developing it. Even our take, they had issues with Warner's. We did some rewrites. We brought on another writer, talented writer named Celeste Ballard. She wrote a new draft, a new screenplay. Anyway, when this new guy came in from DreamWorks to run Warner's, we had one meeting with him basically, where he said, we weren't even sure how much do we need to deal with him, because really James Gunn is the guy in charge. So anyway, he said, yeah, nice to meet you. I just want to let you know, you're done. Basically, he just said, we don't know if we're going to really develop this project or not. And so he was the new guy. So he wanted his own projects to be done. He thought that might be done, but he didn't like our take on it. And we thought our take was problematic. Even then, it was, some of the story stuff wasn't quite working right, and yada, yada. They were developing it as an all CG feature. The idea of the combination wasn't in the thing. Oh, that was still the way we preferred to do it. We still think that's the best way to do that movie, is to do it as a combination movie. Anyway, so he basically said, see you later. So we are not involved in that one. It may happen, and it may be good. I hope it's good. It's a neat property. And I think they are still developing it, but they're developing it with other people and not with us. So we're no longer connected to it now. So it was disappointing, but it's Chinatown. What can I say? Yeah. Our brief time at Warner's did not encourage either Ron or myself the idea of life in a big studio. That's what we're missing since we retired from Disney. I mean, to get any sort of feature film off the ground is such an ordeal and such a nightmare and such a merry-go-round, particularly even more so outside of Disney, but even at Disney too, really. But as management changes, animated films can take years to do, and then management changes, and then they want to do their films. They don't want to do the last regime's films. So all that stuff goes out the window. And so you're constantly starting over, and it just is not a good way to make movies. So the idea of doing short projects that I have total control over seems far, far more appealing to me and satisfying. So at the moment, I don't necessarily envision myself getting back into the big studio picture. I think there's plenty of very capable, very talented young directors, and I love what they did with the Spider-Verse movie, and I thought Nimona was an excellent movie, and there's a lot of talent out there, and certainly interest in these films, and I'm happy to see them made, but I'm not chomping at the bit to get on the feature, merry-go-round again, particularly myself. But I think I do want to make another one, as long as I joked even on this one, or it wasn't really a joke, it's the truth, but I'm an old guy, I'm 70 years old, and but if I can still draw, and if I can still think, and if I can still see, those are the three of the main ones, you know, generally if I'm healthy, you know, I can do one of these films again, you know, and all that. But if any of those parts, and if any of those letters are not there for the table, it may be a hard time. And I did like, you know, on I'm Hip, I animated the whole thing in its entirety. I animated every shot in it. And although, like I said, I had great cleanup help. If I do another one, I don't know, will I animate the whole thing? It depends. Some of them I'm thinking about are actually a little longer, and it might be like, oh, there's no way you can do all that animation. But I would prefer to animate the whole thing myself again. So we'll see if any of these happen. I don't know. Yeah. It comes around.
Are you gonna go are you gonna go to the Annie Awards?
Actually, I will appear left-handedly at the Annie Awards because I don't want to reveal the secret, but I did a drawing for somebody that I think they're going to project and show at the Annies. If you're going to be there, you'll see it.
Oh,
But
okay.
I'm out of town during the Annies. I'm going to see my grandkids in Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you for coming on Animated Educated. I don't want to. We could talk all day here.
No, that's
you
okay.
know,
All right. Well,
yeah.
thank you, Jim. Good luck.
Okay. Yeah. Good
And,
luck and have fun
yeah.
and you know, seeing your grandkids and all that. And
I will. Okay.
yeah. All right.
Okay. I'll wave at Columbia College as I go by. I'm going to Chicago briefly, so I'll give it your regards.
Well, there you have it. There was John Musker. Yeah, it's sometimes I just, you know, you don't have to have questions. You just let him go. He you know, answers the questions as you're thinking of the question. There's the answer. So yeah. So anyway, I want to thank John for coming on Animated Educated and talking about all the stuff we talked about. And I'm Hip. If you haven't seen I Hip, you can see it at the Animation Show of Shows, which will be coming out soon. Start looking for that. It'll probably be playing near theater near you. And yeah, it's a fun film, and not just that film, but all the other films in that Show of Shows is always fun to watch. So if you do get to see it, let us know if you liked them. And if you did like this episode anyway, you can press that button right there to subscribe, or you can go down and watch a bunch of other videos I have here, or you can take a look at these two videos right here too. Yeah, and we'll see you next time on Animated Educated.